Unit 8, LT5 notes, multiplying radical expressions. So here are the rules when you're multiplying radical expressions. First, you're going to multiply the coefficients outside of the radical together. So if I have 2 square root 6 times 3 square root 5, I'm going to multiply first my numbers on the outside. So 2 times 3, and I would get 6 with the square root of something under there. Okay, the next step is to multiply the radicands inside the radical together. So I have 2 square root 6 times 3 square root 5. Well, we already did the 2 times 3, so we know we have a 6. And now we're going to find the square root, what goes under the square root. So 6 times 5 is 30. So my radicand is 30. And then you're going to simplify your radicand. So then you're going to take that and find, and simplify that. So let's try a couple of those. So number 1, so the first step is to multiply anything that is outside of your radical. So I have no numbers on the outside, so then I'm just going to go ahead and multiply what's on the inside. So I'm going to take that 2 times that 5, and I get 10. Because they're both under the radical, we need the radical there. Okay? If I were to break up that 10, I would get a 2 and a 5, and I don't have any pairs. So really, I can't do that. So my final answer is just going to be square root of 10. Okay, let's look at number 2. I'm going to take the first 2 numbers on the outside. So 4 times 6. 6 times 4 is 24. And then I'm going to take what's under my radical symbol. So I have a 3 and a 2, and I multiply those. So 3 times 2 is 6. So I'm going to get a square root of 6. And again, if I were to try to break up 6, I would get a 2 and a 3. And there's no pairs, so I can't simplify that 6 anymore. So my final answer is going to be 24 with the square root of 6. Okay, so for this next one, first we're going to simplify. So we're going to take 20 times 6, and I get 120. And that's going to be under my radical. And then I have 2 x's on my first one. So I have 2 right here. And really there's only 1 on my second one. Well, remember when we multiply those, we actually add our powers. So there's really 3 x's. So I'm going to go ahead and put my x's 1, 2, 3 to represent the 3 between the 2 of them. Now I'm going to break up that 120. So first I'm going to change colors here. So 120. So I know it's an even number, so I'm going to do 120 divided by 2, and I get 60. And then if I divide that 60 by 2, I get 30. If I divide that by 2, I get 15. And then if I do 15, I can't divide 15 by 2 because it's an odd number, so I'm going to do 3 and 5. And now I'm going to find my pairs. So I have a pair of 2's right here. And that's the only pair I have. So that pair of 2's is going to come out front. And then I have a 2, a 3, and a 5. Well, 3 times 5 is 15, and 15 times 2 is 30. So under my radical symbol, I'm going to have that 30. And then I'm going to look at my pair of x's. So next I'm going to look at this pair right here. So I have 1 pair of x's. Remember, your x's come out front, so I have 1 pair, so those are going to come out next to the 2. And then I have 1 left over, so that's going to go on the inside. So I have 2x times the square root of 30 times x. And that will be your final answer right there. Okay, same with number 4. The first thing I'm going to do is multiply what's outside. Well, I have a 4 outside right here, and I really have a 1 right there. And 4 times 1 is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put my 4 on the outside. And then I'm going to take what's on the inside, and I'm going to start with my numbers. So I have an 18 and a 3. So now I'm going to multiply that 18 times that 3, and I get 54. So under my radical, I'm going to put a 54. And then I have 2 A's right here and 2 A's right there. So really I have 4 A's. So I'm going to go ahead and write those 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, the next step, I'm going to take that 54 and I'm going to simplify it. So 54 is an even number, so I'm going to divide it by 2, and I get 27. 27 is an odd number, so I'm going to divide that by 3 and 9, and then 3 and 3. Okay, now I'm going to look for my pairs. So I have a pair of 3's right here, and that's the only pair I have, and then I have a 2 and a 3. but I also have a pair of A's right here and a pair of A's right there. Okay, remember our numbers are going to come out to the outside if they're a pair. So right now on the outside, I have that 4. So 4 is going to come on the outside times, I have that pair of 3s. So that 3, that set of 3s is going to come out on the outside. And then I have 2 pairs of A's. So I have A times A. So 4 times 3 times A times A. Remember those A's really just have those little tiny ones on them? And then what's left under the radical, I have the 2 and the 3. So 2 times 3, well, I'll just put those in there, 2 times 3. Okay, now we're going to simplify. 4 times 3 is 12. And A to the first times A to the first is A to the second. And then you're going to have the square root of 2 times 3, which is 6. So this will be your final answer. Okay, number 5, I'm going to attack the same way. So first I'm going to take the numbers that are outside of the radical. So I have a -3 and a 6. So I'm going to take that -6, and I'm going to multiply by that 3, and I get -18. Okay, and then I'm going to use my radical symbol again, and now I take the 7 times the 21, and I multiply those, and those are going to go under your radical. So 7 times 21 gives me 147. And then I have to look how many M's I have. Well, on this set I have 3, but over here these ones are R's, so we can't combine that 2 and that 3. So really I have 3 M's, so I'm going to say M, M, M. And on the other side I have 2 R's, so I'm going to say R, R. Okay, now that 147 I'm going to break up. 147 is an odd number, so I'm going to divide it by 3. So 147 divided by 3 gives me 49. And then 49, I know 7 and 7, and both of those are prime numbers. Okay, so now I'm going to find my pairs. So far I have a pair of 7s that can come out front, and then I have a lonely 3. I have a pair of M's that are going to come out as 1, and a pair of R's that will come out as 1. So I have -18 that was already there, times that pair of 7s, and then I have 1 set of M's, and 1 set of R's. And then under my radical is what's left over. So under my radical, I still have this 3. So that 3 goes under the radical. I still have this 1 M. So now that M is going to go here. So then I'm going to take that -18 times 7, and I get -126. So -126 M R, then square root 3 M, and that will be your final answer. Okay, number 6 is going to throw a little bit more at you. So notice you have these parentheses right here and right here. I probably should have picked a different color besides yellow. Okay, so what those parentheses mean, that square root of 3 on the outside has to be distributed to the numbers on the inside. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute that square root of 3 to the 5, and I'm also going to distribute it to the 4. So 3 times 5 is 15. So this is going to turn into the square root of 15 minus 3 times 4. Oh, sorry. Oops, sorry. I thought that 4 was just a 4, but it is a square root. So 3 times 4 is square root of 12. Well, right now we can't subtract them because they are not in the same. So I have 15. I can only break up with a 3 and a 5. So that can't change. That square root of 15 can't change. So let's check 12. So I know a 2 and a 6 and a 2 and a 3. So yes, I have a pair. So I can bring that pair to the outside. So I still have the square root of 15. That's not going to change, minus the 2 is going to come on the outside. And what's left over comes on the inside. And that's a 3. And those ones we cannot combine because when I look, I have a square root of 15 and a square root of 3 under that radical, or those radicands are not the same. So that would just be your final answer. You don't have to change that anymore. That's just going to be your final answer. All right, number 7 is also a distributing problem. So we're going to multiply the numbers or the coefficients that are on the outside of the square root to the ones that are in the parentheses first. So I'm looking at number 7. I see that there's no number in front of that square root of 2, so really there's a 1 there. So when I distribute, I'm going to distribute the outside or my coefficient of both of them. So I'm going to distribute that -3 to that 1, and that's going to give me a -3. So I'm going to go ahead and write -3. And then I'm going to multiply that square root 3 to that square root 2. Well, 3 times 2 is 6. So then I'm just going to leave that square root of 6 right there. Okay, now I'm going to distribute that -3 square root 3 to that 6. So again, if there's no number in front of that 6, it's really a 1. So -3 times 1 is still going to give me a -3. And there's a plus in the middle, so I'm going to go ahead and add those. So I'm going to say plus -3 times 1 is going to give you a -3. So I distributed those ones. And now I'm going to distribute that square root of 3 to that square root of 6. Well, 3 times 6 is 18, so that's going to be the square root of 18. Now I have to look and see if I can simplify these. So if I were to break up 6, I would get 2 and 3. And there's no pairs there, so you can't simplify that one at all. So I'm just going to leave it as -3 square root 6. Okay, so now let's see if we can break up that 18. So I'm going to put my legs on, and I know 2 times 9 is 18, and 3 times 3 is 18. When I look at those, I have a pair of 3s. Remember, your pairs of 3s come out front, and then I have a leftover 2. So I'm going to rewrite what I have. So right now, I have a -3 square root 6. And then when you have a plus and a negative, we can just change all of these to a minus symbol. So then I'm going to say minus. You have your regular 3 that was right here, and then you have your pair of 3s that are right there. So 3 times 3, and then what's left over that's going to go in my square root is a 2. So I have a 2 under there. Okay, now I'm going to simplify one more time. So the first one's not going to be simplified, so I'm just going to leave that as is. So I have a -3 square root 6 minus 3 times 3 is 9 with a square root of 2. And then I'm going to look, do what's my radicands or what's under my radical, are they the same? If so, I could go ahead and subtract those, but they're not the same. So I'm just going to leave that as my final answer. So this is going to be your final answer. Okay, I'm going to do that same thing for number 8. If there's no number out front of your radical, there's actually a 1. So really there's a 1. And remember, we do our coefficients first. So I'm going to distribute that 1 to that 3. So 1 times 3 is 3. And then we still have that square root 14x. Okay, there's no number out front of this negative. So I'm going to leave that a -1. So now I have 1 times -1, which gives me a -1. And I'm going to go ahead and put that 1 there for right now. And now I'm going to take my 14x times my 2x. So 14 times 2 gives me a 28. And remember, when we multiply, we actually have to add those powers. So x1 and x, so x times x would be x2 because of the 2 x's. So I'm going to say x squared. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at those. And 14, let's see what we can break up. I can do 2 and 7. That makes my 14. Well, 2 and 7, I don't have any pairs there, so I know I'm not going to break those up anymore. I'm just going to leave that as 3 square root 14x minus that 1 square root 28x. Okay, so when I'm looking at that 28, let's see if we can break that up. Oops, I'm still on my eraser. Put that 28 back. And now I'm going to use my legs. So 28 divided by 2, so I'm going to have 2 and 14. And then 14, I can have 2 and 7. So when I'm looking at those, I do have a pair of 2s. And then I have a leftover 7. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this. So 3 square root 14x minus my 2 is going to, well, I'll leave that 1 there, times that pair of 2s. And then I have a square root. That 7 is going to go inside. And then I have 2 x's. So I'm not quite done with that one because I see that I have a pair of x's right here. Remember, x come out front. So I'm going to simplify a little bit more. So this is still going to be 3 square root 14x minus 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to leave that 2. This pair of x's is going to come out front. So I'm going to put 1x there. Pairs come out as 1 with the square root of 7. Okay, then I'm going to double check. Do I have the same under the radical? I don't, so I know I'm done. So this can just be my final answer. Okay, so we have another distributing problem. So we're going to go ahead and distribute that 2 square root 2x to that 6 minus 3 square root 5x. So when I do that, I'm going to take my outside numbers or my coefficients. Oops, didn't need to do that. So I have a 2 and a 6. 2 times 6 is 12. So I distributed that 2 to the 6. And then we have the square root of 2x. That's still going to be there. And there's nothing with that 6 that I can multiply it by. And then it says subtract, so I'm going to minus. And then I'm going to take that 2 and distribute it to that negative 3. 2 times negative 3 is a negative 6. And see how I already have that negative in there with the subtract, so we're just going to leave that there. And now I'm going to distribute that 2x with the 5x. Well, 2 times 5 is 10. And then x times x is going to be x squared. Okay, we can't break that 2 up anymore, so that's going to stay the same. And 10, if I were to break that up, I would get 2 and 5. So there's nothing else I can do with that 2 and 5, but I see that those two x's are really equal to x times x. So that's going to be a pair. So I'm going to rewrite this and say 12 square root 2x minus 6, whoop, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So because we had that pair of x's, those come out front. So that's, whoops, my eraser's still on. So that pair comes out as 1. And then under the radical, I still have that 10. So that 10's not going anywhere, so it's still a 10. So this one, you have 12 square root 2x minus 6x square root 10. And that's just going to be your final answer for that one. Okay, so let's look at number 10. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take my coefficients, or what's out front, and I'm going to distribute those. So I have this 2, and I'm going to distribute that to the 1. Well, 2 times 1 is 2. And then there's nothing after that 1, so I'm just going to leave that square root 3 as a square root 3. Okay? Now I'm going to distribute this 2. Really, there's a 1 out front of that 5. So 2 times 1 is 5. So I'm going to say plus 5, or sorry, 2 times 1 is a 5. 2 times 1 is 2. So I'm going to leave that as a 2. And then I'm going to multiply my 3 and my 5. So 3 times 5 is 15. So under that radicand is going to be a 15. Okay, so you have that. And then you have plus. And now I have to distribute that second set there. Okay, so in front of this 2 is really a 1. So 1 times 6 is 6. And then because it was a plus before it, I'm going to say plus 6. And then you still have that square root of 2. Okay, now we have minus, so I'm going to subtract. And now I'm going to take this 1 times that 3, which gives me a 3. And that 2 times that 5. So under my radical symbol, 2 times 5 is 10. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 10 there. Okay, when I look at that, 3 I can't break up anymore. 15 would be a 5 and a 3, so that can't break up. 2 would just be a 2. You're not going to make that any smaller. And 10 would be a 2 and a 5. So there's nothing else we can do with those ones. So we're just going to leave these as is. That's going to be your final answer for number 10. All right, last slide here, guys. When we look at these, notice that you have a set of parentheses here and you have a set of parentheses here. So those are actually being multiplied. And if you remember right, when we were multiplying before, we used the box method. And we're going to do the same thing with this. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a box. And then across the top, I'm going to use, let's do this first set. So I'm going to put and it doesn't matter if you go on the top or down the side, but I'm going to put that first set across the top. So I'm going to have a square root of 5 above this box and a square root of 3 above this box. Okay, and then I'm going to use this set right here and I'm going to put it on the side. So I have a square root of 5 here, and notice you have a minus in front of your square root 3, so that's a negative square root 3. Okay, and then we're just going to multiply like we did before. I'm going to take this 5 times this 5, and I get the square root of 25. Okay, now I'm going to take this 3 times that same 5, and I get square root of 15. Okay, then this one times that 3, so 5 times 3, and I get a negative square root 15. And then I'm going to do this negative square root 3 times that 3, and I get a negative square root 9. Okay, and now we're just going to write them out like we did before. So remember our first one, so this first box right here, we're going to start it. So I'm going to have a square root of 25. And then when I look at these two boxes, these two we can combine, and we can combine those because they're both the square root of 15. So you have the square root of 15 minus the square root of 15. Well, those just cancel each other out, so we don't even have to do anything with those. And then we're going to end with our negative 9, negative square root 9. So I'm going to do minus the square root of 9. When I look at these, this 25 can be broken up, and I can have a 5 and a 5, right? So they're going to come out as a pair. So that's going to come out as a 5. And this 9, I can break up as a 3 and a 3. And that 3 and that 3 is a pair. So really, I have 5 minus 3. Whoops, I did some of that in my head, and I gave you the answer. So really, I have 5 minus 3. And nothing's left under the radical symbol. So 5 minus 3 is 2. So your final answer for this whole problem is just a 2. Okay, we're going to do that same thing with number 12. So I'm going to go ahead and start by making my box. And I'm going to use this first one right here. And I'm going to go across the top. Again, you can go across the top or down the side. It doesn't matter. So this one is going to be a 4. And this is going to be a square root of 2. And then I'm going to use these ones right here, and I'm going to put those down the side. So I have 4, and then minus square root 2, okay? So I'm going to take the 4 times the 4, and those are going to go in my first box. 4 times 4 is 16, so I'm just going to put my 16 right here. And now I'm going to take that 4 times that square root of 2. That's going to give me a 4 with a square root of 2. Okay. Now I'm going to do the 4, this 4 times this negative square root 2, and that's going to go right here. And that would just be a negative. The negative is going to come out front. So that's going to give me a negative 4 with a square root of 2. And finally, I'm going to do my square root 2 and my negative square root 2. And that's going to give me a negative square root, whoops, I forgot my square root. Negative square root 4. Okay, so now we're going to start with that top left box. So top left box is just a 16. So I'm going to start with a 16. We're going to combine these two, because they both have that square root 2 and that square root 2. Remember, if they have the same, they're just going, you can combine those. So I have a 4 minus 4, and those are just going to cancel out. So those are not even there. And then I have minus the square root of 4. When I think of 4, I can break it up. I can have a 2 and a 2. 2 times 2 is going to come out as 1. So this is still going to be a 16. And then 2 times 2 comes out as 1, so it's just going to be that 1, 2. So 16 minus 2 equals 14. So my final answer for all of that is 14. That is the end. Some of these are a little bit tricky to understand, so please reach out to your teachers if you're getting stuck or if you're unsure, and make sure that we know that you're on the right track.